Welcome back to another episode of as I always say, we need to get a name. Just saying the BSD preview show doesn't quite hit. But welcome back to the preview show for Big Ten Championship Week. Who would have thought that we were going to be here, but somehow we are. Penn State prepares to take on the number one ranked, the undefeated Oregon Ducks in the Big Ten Championship game this Saturday. As always, I'm your host, Patrick Kerbler, and I'm joined by BSD staff writer Tim Aiden. Tim, who would have thought that we would be here even a week ago? Who would have thought that we were going to be here talking about the Oregon Ducks taking on Penn State? This is just I still don't believe that it happened. It's crazy.
I mean, I think I said it on the Maryland postgame show. I did not wake up that morning thinking that Penn State would be, by the time Penn State and Maryland would kick off, that Penn State would have a shot at clinching the other spot in the title game. I assumed Ohio State was going to take care of Michigan, and really wasn't until maybe that final drive where I think it was like the drive ended in a field goal, but it's like 3rd and 6, and Michigan's running back looks like he's going to get stuffed in the backfield, but then he just bounces off a bunch of guys and takes off down the sideline. And then I started thinking to myself, oh man, this might actually happen. Like, they might actually do this. And sure enough, they did. And yeah, it's still so crazy to me that we're, here recording this preview show on a Wednesday night. And I think I mentioned I booked a flight to Indy last Saturday, so meeting up with some friends there. So I'm looking forward to that. It's going to be a quick out and back trip, but I'm excited. Win or lose, I mean, this should be a cool experience. And
Did you go to the 2016 game?
I did not. So this is my first ever Big Ten championship game that I'm attending. So it'll be an experience. I don't know. Did you go to the 2016 game or?
I did, yeah. I drove out. It was the year after I graduated, so it was like in between because I was starting my job, post-college job. I waited a couple months. I didn't start until January, so it's like, from November, December, like all that. I was just any type of fun to be had, I was trying to have. So yeah, I ended up driving out, left the Philly area, drove to State College to meet friends that were still at Penn State at the time. Shout out Jack Lawn. Drove out with him from State College. We'd probably left at like 7 a.m. Got to the game at like 4 p.m. Just did like the straight shot to Indianapolis, which I don't know if you've ever driven through Ohio and Indiana, Tim, but it's flat. There's not a whole lot out there as far as like sightseeing goes. I know you're not. I mean, I believe you're originally from PA, since you were a townie, right? Originally,
I am a town. Although, fun fact, I was born in Columbus, Ohio, so that's where my mom's from. So we used to go back a lot as a kid to visit my grandparents. So of course I don't remember too much about pay attention to the road trips back then, is how flat it was, but I can see how that would be driving through Ohio and into Indiana.
I know some people complain about like PA's highways and how it can be boring. Like, I will take the mountains of Pennsylvania over the flats of.
At least you get scenery in PA.
Yeah. Anyway, enough about our travels. It was a great time in 2016, aided by just a fantastic game in Penn State coming back from as they were wanted, coming back from being down 28-7 at one point. Indianapolis, cool city, very easy to get into and out of. It's funny when you live on the East Coast and all these cities, Philadelphia, Boston, New York, right? They were all built. You can tell that they were built before cars, and then you go to a place like Indianapolis that clearly was built with like travel in mind, and they have all these highways that I think they have I'm going to exaggerate a little bit, but it feels like they have 8 highways to just go right into the city. So there's never too bad of traffic. But anyway, we can say that we can save our favorite U.S. cities for another episode, because it is time to talk about the game itself. Like we said before, Penn State will be taking on Oregon this Saturday at I think it's 8 o'clock on CBS. I don't know if it's 7:30 or 8 o'clock, what exactly
8 o'clock.
it is, but 8 o'clock on CBS. So we don't have to hear Gus Johnson cry that Ohio State is not in the game. Fortunately, it's not on Fox, it is on CBS. So excited for that, at least, because I will not be going to the game. I'll be watching on TV. So I will be able to hear Gary Danielson and Brad Nessler on CBS. Before we get into particulars of the game, and we have plenty of thoughts on Oregon, We are recording this on Wednesday night, so we do have practice updates from James Franklin. Two main players that have been or were out for the Maryland game, wide receiver Trey Wallace and cornerback Elliott Washington, both were at practice tonight. And from all accounts that I saw on Twitter, it sounds like that they were basically full go. And not to put words in James Franklin's mouth, but it seemed like he basically said, hey, we don't really talk about injuries, but you guys saw what you saw here tonight. So it sounds like Trey Wallace will be a go. It sounds like LA Washington will be a go. We'll get into those guys, perhaps more specifically as we talk about kind of how they impact that Oregon game. But to have a starting cornerback, to have a starting wide receiver back for this game, very important because, Tim, Oregon is a good football team, a very, very good football team. They are undefeated. The only undefeated team left in FBS, right? I'm not missing anyone.
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any other even like group of 5 schools that are undefeated. They're undefeated for a reason because they are very good. So just like without getting too knee deep in particulars, just like your main takeaways from looking at Oregon, knowing that I think at least how I watch as a fan, right? You watch as Oregon games, not thinking that Penn State's going to really play them, but now that Penn State's going to play them, how do you kind of look at Oregon as you've been researching and watching things about the Ducks this week?
Well, the one thing I'd say is, they're athletic. I mean, both sides of the ball. I mean, we'll start with the offense. I mean, you got Dylan Gabriel, transfer from Oklahoma, and also previously of UCF as a quarterback. Shifty guy, but also a pretty accurate thrower. 24 touchdowns to 6 interceptions, throwing for 2,275 yards. So he's been pretty solid for them. Jordan James, their running back, averages close to 6 yards a carry. He's got 1,166 yards on running the ball, 13 touchdowns. So he's been pretty solid. Noah Winnington, also a pretty good backup for them. He's averaging only 5 yards a carry, has 455 yards and 5 touchdowns. So they got some quality backs. And of course, be remiss to say their receiving core is a big part of what makes them so explosive. We got Tez Johnson, Evan Stewart, who's a transfer from Texas A&M, Trayshawn Holden. All three of those guys.
Alabama. That's going to be something that pops up a lot during this conversation is that, and it's even more so on the defense, just it is so many transfers. Like you really don't appreciate it being a Penn State fan. I mean, we have our fair share of transfers too, but they are just loaded with transfers. But anyway.
Well, when you're loaded with Phil Knight money too, it helps to be able to lure these kids for the portal. But yeah,
if only the CEO of Nike was a Penn State graduate, Tim. If only, wouldn't that be nice?
He's an admirer of Penn. I mean, he and Joe Paterno were BFFs.
I'm talking about Mark Parker. I actually don't know if he's the CEO of Nike anymore. I know he was, but it's just frustrating that they have a second in command at Nike. I think he's something with Disney now. Anyway, beyond the point. Continue on, Tim, about Oregon.
Well, yeah. So, frankly, the things I would do to have any one of those 3 receivers, because even their number 3 guy will be the clear-cut number 1.
Yeah.
Right now at Penn State. But Johnson, he's the leader of the group. 685 yards, 9 touchdowns, 6-7 catches. Stewart's got 48 catches, 613 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Holden, 36 catches, 581 yards, 3 touchdowns. And, of course, you got a tight end, too. Maybe he's not Tyler Warren, but Terrence Ferguson's still pretty legit. 35 catches, 490 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So, you got to count for the tight end, too.
How would you compare this offense to Ohio State? Because I think for me, when I was looking at Oregon and trying to figure out how is Penn State going to match up with these guys, I just kept coming back to the Ohio State game. Like, how did Penn State compete with Ohio State? Because it's probably going to be a good idea what they're able to do against Oregon. So how do you see this offense versus the Ohio State offense?
I mean, maybe they don't have a Jeremiah Smith in the receiving corps, but they're still going to have to account for that receiver group. I think the key is going to be they're going to have to make sure that Jordan James doesn't go off on them. They did a good job of keeping, for the most part, they kept Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins from running all over them. They kept them mostly in check. So they're going to have to do the same with Jordan James. And of course, I think the real key is they're going to have to make sure they get some pressure on Dylan Gabriel. I know he's he's good at he's kind of a dual threat guy, so maybe they might have someone spy on him, perhaps. But it's gonna be important that they all they get pressure. That's it's kind of their MO. They get pressure on the opposing quarterback. They usually are able to make good things happen for the defense, even if they don't necessarily get home with a sack. They at least can force them into a rush throw or force them to throw it away. So they're going to have to do that. If they allow, if they allow Gabriel to sit back there and and be able to take his time, I mean, he's going to hit his targets. And especially if they can get James in that run game going, it's going to just open things up for Oregon. So they really got to make sure I think first and foremost, don't allow Oregon to run all over them, and then try to generate some pressure. They may not be able to do it necessarily with their front four like they have on other teams, but maybe you bring the occasional safety blitz or blitz linebackers or something. They'll have to come up with. I'm sure Tom Allen to come up with some creative ways to get Dylan Gabriel stymied. And the key is you got to get Oregon off schedule. If you can force them into some second or third and long situations, I think that's ideal for this defense. But you just got to make sure they don't. They're not allowed to do whatever the heck they want to do to your defense.
Sure. I think one of the important things to remember with this Oregon offense is, and really, I mean, I don't want to say the team in general, but the offense in particular, is that right when we think of the Oregon offense, we generally think of, you go back to those Chip Kelly years of like just crazy amounts of explosiveness and being able to take the top off of the defense. And not to say that they can't do that, because they have been without Ted Johnson. They're probably their top wide receiver, and certainly their deep threat. He's a slot guy, but one of their deep threats. He did come back for the Washington game last week, so he was out for, I wouldn't say like 3 weeks or so, but he is back now. So that could slightly skew the stats, kind of gave them a pause. But it's not as explosive an offense as one would necessarily think. Just to read off, and this is just plays from scrimmage. Oregon had 192 plays of 10 plus yards. Tim, do you know how many Penn State had if Oregon had 192?
192 plays on offense. So
yeah. How many do you think Penn State had offensively? Just to compare the Penn State offense to the Oregon offense.
Well, if you're saying they're not as explosive as you think, I'm going to guess that number's higher for Penn State.
Yeah. 195. So right, very close. 20 play yards. So plays of 20 yards or more. Oregon had 58. Penn State had 57. Plays of 30 yards or more. Penn State had 22. Oregon had 24. Plays of 40 yards or more. 12 and 12. So looking at it that way, now if we break that out, rushing versus passing, Oregon all of a sudden it does become a little bit more explosive when it comes to the passing attack compared to Penn State, at least in that 10 to 20 yard area. I think at 30 it becomes pretty close again. But I just want to point this out, and maybe this is just like the perception of Penn State, and whether that's media or fans. I don't know if you saw this, but I saw some tweet, and maybe it was a fake tweet, I don't know, but 95% of the money is on Oregon minus 3.5 on one of the sports books. That is a lot for 3.5, which is not a large number.
I'm surprised they're not bumping the line up further if there's that much money, if money's going that in one direction like that.
So the only thing that could mean, Timothy, and I know that you're not a gambler as much as I am, but that's a case of Vegas putting their foot down, and we can check here in a second if that line has changed, because I haven't checked in I think since this morning or last night. That means Vegas is like pretty confident that they have this rate, that 3.5 is exactly where they want it. Because like you're saying, that's something that would rise up if Vegas is like, oh, because they want it to be closer to that 50-50 area. So that's the only thing I'll say, just as somebody who likes to partake in the gambling a little bit. A 95 to 5 split is a lot, and it's that perception of this Penn State team, and specifically this offense, that that this is Galen Hall and Jay Paterno back in 2010, when it's not. Not to say that I think Oregon's offense is better. I think Oregon's offense certainly has a higher potential just based upon, the weapons that they have at receiver in particular. And just how well Dylan Gabriel could potentially play. But this is an Oregon offense that's a lot more dink and dunk. That's comfortable taking what the defense gives them, and sometimes that bites them in the butt, sometimes it doesn't. Most of the time they're able to out athlete teams in the red zone and get touchdowns. But we've seen Dylan Gabriel struggle at times this year with throwing interceptions. I don't have like the exact numbers in front of me, but he's thrown, I know, against Wisconsin, I think against UCLA, I believe even against Idaho, he's thrown red zone interceptions. So just something important for Penn State that it's a little point out the obvious, like, hey, let's get some interceptions off of Gabriel. But more than anything, it's realizing that Oregon's going to move the ball, and not letting them beat you with those explosive plays. What about Oregon defensively? Because I think, once again, going back to like perceptions and things like that, I think when people think of Oregon, they're maybe not thinking of the stoutest defense in the world, when it's an impressive unit.
Defense.
Yeah, especially up front.
Yeah, the name I keep hearing on broadcast, I feel, is Mateo Uyunglele, one of the defensive ends. I don't know if he's related to DJ or not.
But, I believe they are brothers, yes.
They're brothers. Okay. Brother of DJ Uyunglele. 10.5 sacks in the season. He's their leading sacks guy, but not too far behind him is Jordan Birch, 8.5 sacks for him. So they got a pair of defensive ends that could cause some real problems for Penn State, and that it's going to be this may be the stiffest. We talked about how tough Ohio State's defense was, but just these two guys alone could make this the stiffest challenge yet for Penn State's O-line. They're
specifically the defensive line, and Ohio State has a really good defensive line too, right? When we talked about Ohio State, it was, these are day one, day two guys, NFL draft pick wise, that are on Ohio State's defensive line. Just to read off, and James Franklin talked a little bit about this tonight, where he was like, yeah, so Oregon, their defensive line, they're really big and they're really fast, which is generally what you want. 340 pounds, 310 pounds, 295 pounds, and 270 pounds. That is not their defensive tackle rotation. That is their starting defensive line. They are big. They are fast. They're transfers. The 340-pound guy, Caldwell, is from Houston. 310 is Derek Harmon from Michigan State. 295, Jordan Birch is from South Carolina, right? So these are guys that were good at other places that have now come to Oregon, and it's I don't want to say a NFL offense or NFL defensive line, but it's up there with Ohio State, like you were saying.
I'll tell you what, this is also why I thought to myself when, with the new incoming big, West Coast schools, I thought only Oregon was the team that would be able to adapt right away to Big Ten play, because the way, because their physicality, because how big they are up front. And, the other teams, UCLA, USC, Washington, they don't have that size in the trenches that Oregon does. So, they came in here ready to, you saw in the Ohio State game. You don't be a team like Ohio State if you're not good in the trenches, or if you don't have a big D line that can cause problems for opposing offenses. So
average weight of 304 pounds. And I don't believe Jordan Birch, their 6'6", 295 defensive end, I believe he was hurt for that game too, against Ohio State.
So yeah, I got to account for it. And, you mentioned, and if when it comes to scoring defense, I pulled the stat up, both Oregon and Penn State are in the top 10. Penn State's slightly ahead at number 6, but Oregon's right there at number 9. So, your team gives up a lot of points on average. So, this, I didn't see, I forget the over under is, but, wouldn't surprise me if this game has potential to hit the under. Although, of course, playing in a dome environment with no weather factors, maybe, it could be a little higher scoring than you'd expect.
Over under is 49.5.
49.5.
And it's still 3.5 spread wise for the record. So
we're talking like like a 20, like a 27 to 49.5. So if we go over, we're talking like a 27-23 type game,
Yeah.
essentially.
That's where we're looking, somewhere around there. So as far as when you look at Oregon, where do you think Penn State has? And this is a bit of a funny question because it's undefeated Oregon and they're really good, but where is Penn State more likely to, like, what is the path of victory for Penn State? Where are they more likely to have success? Are they more likely to have success as an offense or more likely to have success as a defense? Like, if you're Penn State, do you want to make this or try to make this a track meet, or do you kind of want it to be a little ugly and slow it down a little bit?
Despite the fact that this isn't your, stereotypical Chip Kelly Oregon team, I still wouldn't want to have a track meet with these guys.
Yeah.
I think you got to, Penn State's better off trying to ugly this one up. And the best way to do that, of course, is their defense can give them problems. And what I've noticed in some of Oregon's, especially in the earlier part of the season, like they were having problems getting pushed up against like Idaho and Boise State. Now they've gotten better as the season goes on, but there may be some opportunities for that D line to perhaps wreak some havoc. And I think, you know what? This is a stage where a guy like Abdul Carter can shine. Like I don't think Oregon has faced gone up against a team of a player like Abdul Carter, his versatility. And of course he's rounded into full form as this hybrid defensive end linebacker type guy, so he's I think this could be a big night for him potentially. So if he can have a big night, I mean, it could really, I think if Penn State's going to win this game, Abdul Carter's he's probably got 7-8 tackles, maybe 2 sacks, a couple other quarterback hurries.
They're going to need him.
They're going to absolutely. He's going to have to be a wrecking ball in this game if Penn State's going to win.
Really, and I feel like so much of the talk this week was about, even a reporter asked Nick Singleton after the game, like, made mention to how some of the fans were, kind of rooting for Ohio State to win so that Penn State didn't, had this week off and was just going to be okay with the 5 or 6 seed or whatever seed they would have ended up getting. It just kind of made me think, like, when James Franklin signed this 2022 recruiting class, Drew Aller, Abdul Carter, who we're talking about, this is what kind of made me think of it. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, Denai Denison, right? All these guys. That is his best recruiting class. Argued with the 2018 class, but I think most people go with 2022. Right? They come in after Penn State has that dreadful 2020 season, a bad 2021 season, and as their freshmen, they come into a program that is basically 500 last year's, and they win a Rose Bowl. And maybe not every single guy. Drew Shellen was starting in that game. Nick Singleton scored a touchdown in that game. I think Katron Allen scored a touchdown in that game. After Carter was basically playing starter minutes at that point. You come in, you win a Rose Bowl, you get Penn State back to this place, and just mentioning Abdul Carter, I think that group, like, as far as motivation, and not that there was any question about anybody's motivation on this team, but I think for that group in particular, when you look at how does Penn State win this game, and you talk about the players that need to have big days, it's Abdul Carter, it's Drew Aller, it's Nick Singleton, it's Denai Denison as well, like just the defensive ends in general, along with Abdul Carter. So I think that's just, I don't know, maybe I'm just romanticizing, this class in particular at Penn State, but it's like, this is what they came to Penn State for. It's what a lot of fans.
I think I would be inclined to agree. And I was going to get into the next thing, of course, is like, they got to get the run game going. Nick Singleton's got to be able to pop off some big games. I mean, I'm not expecting him to go bowling over everybody. I mean, Oregon's defense is pretty good, but he's got to be able to pop off some big runs here and there. Well, it's enough to keep Oregon honest, keep Penn State on schedule. And of course, Drew Aller, he's played well all year long. Again, just like Abdul Carter, like, this is your moment to shine, Drew.
Yeah.
And of course, hopefully, of course, Tyler Warren, of course, you got to imagine Oregon's going to do anything they can to keep him in check. But I'm sure Andy Kotelnicki, they'll draw plays, get the ball in his hands, and I would fully expect him to be lining up in the Wild Warren package a few times. And I mean, this is the game where Kotelnicki is going to empty the kitchen sink. This is where all the Big Ten marbles.
Tim, you do X factors for every game on Fridays. Just looking specifically at the offense, and right, we talked about getting Nick Singleton, trying to get him into space, and trying to get Tyler Warren into space. Those are things that, right, we wouldn't say they're necessarily X factors because it's kind of obvious things, and those are things that Oregon's going to be taking away. So when you look at Penn State's offense, who's a guy that you kind of think as like, if he has a big player or two, it could truly swing things. The same way that, let's go back to the 2016 Big Ten Championship. Say Blacknell.
I know where you're going with this.
Plays and just completely changes the game. So not even necessarily, right, because I lead the side. Blacknell probably makes us think like, oh, Omari Evans, and maybe that is your pick. But who's a wide receiver? Let's just say wide receiver who needs to make some big plays. Is Omari Evans or is it somebody else?
I was going to say Omari Evans, because I'm thinking just like Blacknell, that this is a dome environment, so there's no weather factors to worry about. And I saw how Trace McSorley was able to sling the rock around in that domed environment. I mean, I'm trying to, and Drew, I mean, last year when they played Michigan State in Detroit Lions Stadium, Ford Field, he was dropping some real dimes, and I think one of them was actually a deep ball to Omari Evans. So there may be a couple opportunities to do that, and I think he's got to. I think Penn State's going to win this game. I think they got to connect on a deep ball at least once on Saturday night.
I agree, and I think we can come here and say, hey, Penn State needs to establish the run. They need to get the ball to Tyler Warren. All things that are true. I don't know if I have a ton of faith in their running game at this point. It's even, I mean, you look at the stats against Maryland, it's not too bad, but they haven't been dominating the same way that they were kind of to begin the season. So I don't know if Oregon's going to be the team that, all of a sudden we could run for, consistently 5 yards a carry. And same thing with Tyler Warren, right? Like, I don't anticipate this being a game where he's able to, have 11 receptions. Getting Trey Wallace back is so massive. There's really no other. Omari Evans stepped up against Maryland, had 4 receptions, but just as far as even being a I don't want to say a decoy, because I think Trey Wallace is going to be more than that, but just being another guy that Oregon has to be more concerned with. Because if you have Tyler Warren out there, you have Nick Singleton out there, you have Trey Wallace out there, all of a sudden Omari Evans, he's going down that pecking order for Penn State as far as or for Oregon as far as concerns and who should you worry about. I don't want to say that Penn State can't win this game without completing a 30-plus yard pass to Omari Evans, but when I go through this game and how it could play out in my mind, connecting on that deep pass to Omari Evans is something that needs to happen. We saw it against Minnesota. That was a massive play. It needs to happen again. The same way that say Blacknell was able to have big plays. The big plays need to come from other people than just Tyler Warren and Nick Singleton. And Omari Evans is a talented guy, super fast, and those one-on-one options or one-on-one opportunities rather are going to be there. It's a matter of Drew taking those shots and hopefully connecting. So
the same thing holds true for Oregon. They're going to have to.
Yeah,
I think whoever connects on more of these, I don't think there's not going to be too many of them in the game, but whoever's able to take advantage, and connect more on, if they're able to get just a couple more of these, 30 plus, 40 plus yard explosive plays. I mean, I think that's going to be the determining factor.
So which way are you leaning? I mean, I think we're basically at that point, right, where, I mean, you guys don't need us to sit here and tell you that Oregon they are a good team, the same way that Penn State is a good team. I don't think that there's necessarily a lot of, holes, whether it's defensively or offensively. I mean, they're not, just as I usually do, Rushing defense, they allow 3.6 yards per carry, so that's pretty good. It's not elite. That's 8th in the Big Ten, but that would still be like top 25 nationally. Passing defense is 3rd in the Big Ten. Rushing offense on yards per carry is 5th in the Big Ten. Passing offense is 4th in the Big Ten. So we're not talking about 2019 LSU, but this is a team that is very consistent, very efficient, doesn't have a lot of like gaping holes. So just what are we thinking, Tim? What do you think Penn State is able to pull off the upset, or what happens?
I think this is going to be. I think it's going to be a dogfight throughout. Tight game. It's going to resemble like two heavyweight boxers going at it. In the beginning, they're kind of playing a bit more cautiously, just sort of feeling each other out. Then as the fight goes on, someone sees an opening. They get a haymaker in there. Maybe the other guy responds with a haymaker of their own. And it's on. I think. Boy, I know. On paper, I'm sure there's a reason Oregon is favored, but I'll tell you what. The Ohio State game aside, this Penn State team is they found ways to win games, even if the odds seem kind of stacked against them. And I know the reputation of James Franklin in games against top 5 opponents. And the record's not good, but he hasn't played Oregon before. He hasn't lost them enough times in a row to have a mental block against Oregon. And I don't know, just feel, this team, they're destined for something good, something great. I'm going to have Penn State pulling the mild upset here, 27-26. Maybe Ryan Barker walk-off field goal to win the game or something. I think it's going to be a very tight game. Maybe I'm just erring on the side of homerism. I think it's going to be a tight one, and YOLO. So it's my YOLO pick. I'm saying 27-26 Penn State.
That is fair. I don't know if my heart could take a Ryan Barker walk off. But granted, now that's like the other side of this, and I think what Penn State fans have to remember in some sort is that this is, I don't want to say this is free money, because I don't think that Penn State is necessarily locked into that, the 5th or the 6th seed. But if Penn State is in a situation where it's 26-24 and Ryan Barker is attempting a field goal for the win, whether he makes,
I don't think they would, a close loss. They're not gonna. They would have to get blown out by like 3 or 4 touchdowns for that to even be a discussion. But even then, I can't see him dropping any further than maybe like 7 seed at worst.
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame,
they're locked into at least getting a home game at Beaver Stadium. If they lose, of course they win, then they're just skipping ahead of the quarterfinals, maybe Pasadena or who knows. But
yeah, no, it's talked a little bit about this on the playoff reaction. So go and check that out if you haven't yet. But yeah, I think that they won't drop below Tennessee no matter what. I am curious to see what they do with this whole Notre Dame thing, because they flat out said last night that they didn't say they're going to punish teams for losing, but they did say that what happens matters, which, that's fair. And Penn State and Notre Dame do seem so close in their minds that I would be curious if Penn State loses, say they lose by a field goal. Is that enough for them to keep that 5 spot? Do they drop to 6? And then even at that point, so much what happens in the SEC game matters as well, right? If Texas loses, all of a sudden Texas comes back in that group with like the Notre Dame, Ohio State grouping as well. So discussion for another time, though. Just one more to talk about this game. It's been a while since Penn State has really gotten like dominated. Going back to probably the Michigan game in 2022, I think it's the last time, right, when they gave up, 400 plus rushing yards or whatever. That was the last time they really got, just blown out. And even that game, they were only down 16-14 at halftime. I don't think that this Penn State team I don't want to say I don't think they're capable of getting blown out, but it just seems like they're too well rounded, both offensively and defensively, for that to happen. It just a experienced defensive line. A guy like Abdul Quarter there. Linebacker's been, I think, really has turned a corner recently. Tony Rojas getting healthier, Dom DeLuca getting healthier as well. Secondary has been good, although I don't love that matchup for them as far as going against Oregon's wide receivers. I feel like Ohio State will Howard miss a couple shots deep that, if it hits, it's a little bit different of a game. But I have faith that this is going to be a close game. I just don't think that that Penn State has the weapons offensively, right? We talked about, Omari Evans and how important he is. And even the fact, I like Trey Wallace a lot. I think he's a good wide receiver. I want him back next year very badly. The fact that Trey Wallace is like this flat out important to us when he would maybe not start at a lot of other playoff programs kind of says where Penn State's wide receiver room is at. And as good as Nick Singleton is, as good as Katron Allen is, even despite his struggles the last couple of weeks, and as good as Drew has been, and Tyler Warren is incredible. I just think that they lack that extra guy out wide that can really scare Oregon and allow Penn State to take advantage of that. So I'm going with Oregon 25, Penn State 20. So I do have Oregon covering. I'm part of the 95%. I do think it's going to be close. We mentioned before, as far as like the lower scoring goes, I have that as an under. I do think it's going to be, a more low scoring game, because I think even there's a lot of talk about like who has more to play for, Tim.
I mean, I guess, Oregon's trying to remain undefeated, so maybe the Ducks. But then again, I mean, I'm sure at this point Penn State's gotten to this point. I mean, they want to finish the job and win a Big Ten championship. It's been 8 years, so
yeah.
I mean, I don't think either. I don't think either team's going to be more motivated than the other. I think they're both going to want this, even if like. On Penn State's end, as far as I'm concerned, they're playing with house money. I mean, still, they definitely want to win this thing while they're there.
Yeah, it's just it's almost weird of like Oregon's known for, basically 2 weeks now, ever since they beat Wisconsin, that they were going to be, I think it's at least since they beat Wisconsin. I might be confused with the schedule, but right? They even before the Washington game, they clinched their spot. Penn State, is that almost an advantage for Penn State where you're getting into this by this, the good graces of the Lord, like just barely squeaking in? Like, does that almost help you where it's like this hasn't been something that's been in your mind for weeks and weeks and weeks? But on the other end of things, right, like it's not like this is Oregon's first year in the Big Ten. It's not like this is like old hat for them. This isn't like, oh, this is their fifth trip in 7 years to the Big Ten championship, and their fan base and their program doesn't care about winning the Big Ten. I think that's going to be a big thing for them internally, is like, hey, we're the new program in the Big Ten. Winning in the first year is a major accomplishment. The same way for Penn State.
They can relate in that regard. Not the first year, but the second year in the Big Ten, 94, they won the conference. Chance for Oregon to.
Penn State fans still talk about that. It's like, oh, we were the new kids on the block, come in 1994 and win the conference.
It is fitting that 30 years after they met in the Rose Bowl, they're meeting again, this time for all the Big Ten marbles, and with if Oregon is the new kid on the block now. So,
but yeah, I'm going with Oregon. I do think it's going to be close. I think that once again that there's a reason that Vegas has this at 3.5, and we'll see where the chips fall. I mean, we will see where the chips fall. It's just, on one hand, it's like this college football season has been so crazy that it's almost weird to think that Oregon finishes undefeated. Like, it feels like everybody has to have their stumbling block. And against that point, and almost for that point as well, like the idea that Penn State Nittany Lions would be number 1 or number 2 in the country going into the college football playoff is just crazy for me to envision. So, not going with that, though. I'm going with Oregon 25, Penn State 20. How do you think the other games go? How do you think? What do you think about Georgia, Texas? I'm putting you on the spot because I did not tell you that we were going to talk about this. This is spur of the moment. But who do you think wins between Georgia and Texas that rematch?
Whew, man.
I think Texas does.
It's revenge factor for Texas. I think the Longhorns win a close one there. What else we got? Big 12 championship. I'd say give me Arizona State in a close one. Potential first round game for Penn State if they lose on Saturday.
I'm going Iowa State because it's the Big 12, and this would just be the most Big 12 thing ever that everyone is kind of now on Arizona State. So it's like, no, actually, it's going to be this gross Iowa State team that really is like a Big 10 West team reincarnate.
Good on Matt Campbell if that happens. He's been there for a long time. Say Clemson, SMU. I guess, I don't know. Give me SMU. I just don't trust Clemson all that much right now.
I think I agree. The fact that it is in Charlotte leads me to believe it. SMU, I don't believe is like that big of a school as far as like alums go, how many graduates they have, and given that I would imagine Charlotte is very heavy in the Clemson and Charlotte are not very far apart to begin with, but I'm sure Charlotte has lots of Clemson people.
Oh, and give me Boise State over UNLV in the Mountain West Championship.
Give me
Austin Genty.
It's at Boise, so I'll go Boise State. Is that it? Oh yeah, I guess
you guys got Tulane. Got Tulane and Army for the AAC. I'd like the Cadets in that one.
Sure, we'll go with Army.
They're going to need some help though to, be the G5 rep in the playoffs. Though.
Sunbelt, Marshall, Louisiana. It's at Louisiana. I'm going with Marshall, despite the fact that Charles Huff is weirdly having to beg for his job at Marshall because he doesn't have a contract, despite the fact he's been like really good there.
I don't know what's going on with that situation there. Like, is Marshall's just not budging as far as giving him a new contract? Or
I don't know. I don't understand. I don't understand the Charles Huff thing, just in general, because all these jobs are opening from North Carolina to Purdue to West Virginia. Like, I think Charles Huff makes 1,000 cents. Like, I don't know if there is a better, more prepared guy as far as hey, this guy coached under James Franklin and Nick Saban, two of the top 7 coaches who know how to run a program and has seen.
Yeah, I guess maybe he takes one of those openings, one of those.
He's not being mentioned for it at all, though. That's the thing. And it's Marshall's even we don't even want you. It sounds like he might have to go to Southern Miss. So maybe Charles Huff, maybe he's just an a-hole. I don't know. He did block me on Twitter back in the day. I used to tweet at all the coaches I would ask them why they didn't recruit fullbacks, and Huff blocked me, which he unblocked me then, but he did block me for a period of time. So maybe he is just a tough guy, but I'm still going with Marshall though. Is there any other conferences? What else are we?
Oh, you got the MAC, Ohio, and Miami of Ohio.
I'm going. Excuse me.
I just give you Ohio. Give me the Bobcats. I believe. Oh yeah, how could I forget the Conference USA Championship? Western Kentucky versus Jacksonville State. You would never guess who Jacksonville State's coach is, Pat.
I know it's Rich Rodriguez. He's trying to get the West Virginia job, and it sounds like all the big alums. It sounds like Pat McAfee's pushing for Rich Rod back in West Virginia too. So I'm going to go with who
they've already moved on from the Jimbo Fisher talk to bring.
It's all about West Virginia guys. I'm going Western Kentucky because I think Rich Rod is going to be too focused on getting his West Virginia job back, and we're going way too long here. Maybe I should say this for another time, but I don't like when guys leave a job and the Greg Schiano thing, the Randy Edsel thing, they're at Rutgers or at UConn, they leave and then they come back later. I think there should be some sort of rule that isn't allowed. Even though Greg Schiano's been good for Rutgers, but I just feel in the spirit of the game, no, you shouldn't be allowed to do that. So I'm kind of anti-Rich Rod going back to West Virginia. I do like the idea of getting just a former coach to coach you in a bowl game when your coach leaves, though. When Barry Alvarez would just coach Wisconsin randomly in a Rose Bowl, or Bob Stoops would come back. I do like that. But anyway, we're going way off the rails right now. Is that all the conference games? Right?
That's all the conference games, yes.
All right. All right. So you have Penn State 27-26, right?
Yes.
All right. And I have Oregon 25, Penn State 20. We won't be because you will be at the game, but I will be doing something on this YouTube channel after the game. It's going to be very late. It's going to be like 11:45 probably or something like that. But I will be live with someone or maybe by myself. I don't know. I'll figure it out after the game to recap what happens. So make sure that you're subscribed so you know when we go live. Make sure that you like the video because that helps. Checking subscribers right now. I don't think that we climbed as much as we thought, Tim. I think we're only at like 145 or something. Yes, we're at 145 subscribers. So let's get to 150 by the time that Penn State plays Oregon. So
yeah, you know what to do, folks. You like this, you like what you see, and you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel.
And it's not like 90% of you watch this and are not subscribed. So make sure that you are subscribing. So please subscribe. Please like the channel. Make sure you're checking our stuff out at blackshoediaries.com. Tons of stuff this week, from Oregon prep to National Signing Day stuff to we're going to have a basketball game. Well, this is going to come out Thursday, so we have a basketball game today.
They're playing Purdue
big game
tomorrow
against Purdue. So
Thursday night. So
yes, make sure that you are tuned in to everything at blackshoediaries.com. And let's win the Big Ten. That would be pretty neat. So until Saturday, we will see you then. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you then.